Hi guys, welcome back to episode 9 of the EPL Showdown. Today we will be reviewing Chelsea's 1920 season. Here we have with us Smit Trivedi from Chelsea Mumbai. We have Jeet Shah who supports Chelsea. We have Vinamra who supports United and me, Jadon Fernandez, who supports City. Let's get right into it. So starting off with Chelsea this season, 4th of July, Lampard was brought in. He obviously had a transfer ban. He brought in Kovacic was signed and Pulisic, who was brought in the January of the previous season. He started off pretty badly, I would say, with a 4-0 loss to Man United. Then he also lost to Liverpool in the European Super Cup. It then went on to a shaky start. I mean, people doubted Lampard. Then a huge 7-1 win against Grimsby Town, and then after that, 6 wins on the trot till around December. Then Chelsea got pretty inconsistent. Chelsea, New Year changed, and they were still pretty inconsistent. Just before lockdown, they had a few good results, and with Liverpool and Spurs. And although they had a good string of results before lockdown, they still managed to succumb to Bayern 3-0. Post lockdown, Chelsea was still very inconsistent. They somehow, on the last day, managed to scrabble and get into the top four. That was a summary of Chelsea's season. Smith, what are your thoughts? What is your take on Chelsea's season? What were your expectations of Chelsea this season?
Well, frankly speaking, Frank Lampard was in second season as a professional manager. So my expectations were not pretty much high. Being realistic and being optimistic, what I had thought of is actually something that Frank has undoubtedly delivered this season. Like what I had expected and what in the preseason of 1920 me and my friends discussed was that a good performance in either of FA Cup and UCL along with a respectable league position is what something I had expected of from Frank Lampard, and come July 2020, Frank has delivered it.
Yeah, to be honest, I think I
And what?
agree. Like the circumstances in which Frank took this job was probably one of the hardest that you can think of because Chelsea lost a huge player in Eden Hazard. And like, don't get me wrong, as good as a player that he is, he's probably 10 times more important than that to Chelsea because we've just purely been reliant on him in terms of offensive duties for probably the past 5 years, and he delivers every single time. So I think Chelsea had become a bit lazy in that aspect in terms of not really focusing on buying that much attacking talent because purely because of the fact that we had Eden Hazard and we are becoming over reliant on them, and that sort of cost us at the worst time when we were transfer banned and we had to let go of him because he always wanted Real Madrid. We couldn't replace him. So that was one of the biggest sort of difficulty in Frank's season in terms of replacing Eden Hazard's number. On top of that, we saw rivals strengthening a lot. We saw Man United spending heavy. We saw even Arsenal spend money. Spurs had just made the and Spurs also spent heavy. And obviously, Liverpool was short top four finisher. So in terms of expectations for the season, I I thought top four would have been a miracle because I expected Spurs to sort of pick up on that Champions League final season, but they didn't, and eventually we did manage to get a top four spot. So I think all of that credit goes to Frank Lampard.
Couldn't agree with you, Jeetu, right there. Like you have summarized 50 spot on.
Yeah.
So, Smith,
So I
what
mean,
is your thoughts? I mean, what do you think went wrong for Chelsea this season? I mean, obviously they could have achieved much more with the squad they have, I feel. So, what actually tactically or maybe injury-wise probably went wrong for Chelsea?
See,
So
I think
predominantly,
yeah. Jasmine,
yeah,
go.
sorry, go on. All right. So see, one thing that's in limelight whenever you speak of Chelsea is our defense. It is a no-brainer. Like the shittiest goals that we have considered this season are something that have been led due to individual errors or sometimes no coordination between our backline. There has been so many chopping and changing in our backline, which has resulted in poor communication, poor strategy formation, or defending set pieces. From Lampard choosing zonal marking when he started with us to shifting back to man marking, and chopping and changing the tactics of how to defend set pieces has cost us a lot. And frankly, as I said earlier, he's in his second season of management and still learning. He's a learning manager. So that is something that was bound to happen, but not to take away and criticize. The main point is the defense has been extremely poor this season. That has to change if we want to contend for the top four place this season and perform well across other competitions as well.
Yeah, nothing to disagree there. Definitely.
Yeah,
Like
so
in
I
terms
mean, y'all are talking about the defense, and yeah, rightly, y'all had a transfer ban. But I mean, it's not like y'all didn't have any players coming on. It's not like he inherited the same squad as last year. I mean, he got, and it was probably all down to your probably what the director of football probably. What is the name? Martina.
Martina
Marina,
Granos-Pavia.
Yeah,
Marina.
it
Marina,
was more. It was.
Granos-Pavia.
I mean, if it wasn't for her, I think Chelsea would have not even been in the top six team squad wise. So I think credit should also go to her that at the start of the season she
obviously, I
made
think
those
uh,
quick deals about for permanently signing Kovacic, getting Pulisic early before y'all could resume the ban. And I
yeah,
mean, y'all had a ton of say
players on loan.
loan players coming back. So I think I would want to ask you all ki, like when at the start of the season when you all looked at the squad, what did both of you all think was the strong point and what was the weakest point? I mean, did you all think the defense would be as weak as it was, conceding 59 goals at
No, defense was
56 goals this
something.
season?
Yeah, defense was something that was not thought to be such bad. Like there were quite a few players that we saw perform great in championship. Like speaking of Fikayo Tomori and Reece James, also Mason Mount and Tammy Abraham. Like these were star players that performed exceedingly well in 18-19 last season when they were in championships. So obviously all the Chelsea fans had their eye on those four stars and wanted to see how they could perform at the bigger stage. And undoubtedly so Mason Mount and Tammy Abraham have certainly excelled, with Mason Mount hogging more of the spotlight. But comparatively, Reece James hasn't done quite bad for a 20-year-old kid playing in his first professional season at such a higher level, and especially playing in so many competitions altogether, like FA Cup, EFL, Champions League, and Premier League. Playing so many games and especially competing with a certain Chelsea legend like Cesar Azpilicueta is not you can see from a 20-year-old kid.
So
Yeah, and I think in
what
terms
was
of
your
yeah.
what was the weakest point and the strongest point you felt at the start of the
So
season?
before starting this season, obviously my biggest worry was replacing Eden Hazard's numbers any damn day because we've obviously overrelied on them. Our strikers is
Seriously,
very messy recently. We bought in Morata, it didn't work out. We sold him. We got in Higuain. Higuain didn't really work out. Higuain was sent back. So at the end of the day, our experienced striker was Olivier Giroud. Michy Batshuayi, I mean, he's had a decent spell at Dortmund, a 6 month spell, a 6 month okay spell at Crystal Palace as well. But he was never someone who's going to leave, who's going to lead the Chelsea striking force. Being honest, so it was all down to whether it'll be Olivier Giroud starting and Tammy off the bench to provide the numbers. But obviously, if you ask me what was the biggest weakness going into the season, I would say that was offensively replacing Eden Hazard's number. So, and I think that contributes to our defensive lapses this season. But what's happened is, if you look at a defense, if you look at a centre back options, or if you look at left back, right back, none of them are world class, 100%. Like Aspi is amazing, is consistent, but even he's quite aged now. He's way past his prime. So none of them are absolute stonewall world class players. So we've always defended as a unit. So, like if you talk about Sari's system or Conte's, we usually used to have very, very good structure. And I think that is down to because we had Eden Hazard up front. And like our only attacking tactic back then was to pass it to Hazard and he does his magic. That was literally it. So, like when we had the luxury of having Eden Hazard in the squad, we could afford to be very tenacious in defense. We could afford to be very organized. We could afford that sort of off the ball discipline, which made us defense look all right even though we didn't really have world class centre backs at our club. So what's happened this season is we obviously lost David Luiz, and that was a bit surprising because I expected him to be a sort of leader in this young squad. But then the Frank Lampard tells him, okay, you're not a guaranteed starter anymore. I want to give young players as good an opportunity to claim their stake. He sort of thought it's the right time to jump boat and he switched to Arsenal. Okay, no worries. That was good for us. So we started the season with our centre back options being Antonio Rudiger, Andreas Christensen, Kurt Zuma, and Fikayo Tomori. Fikayo Tomori
Not to
absolutely.
forget Mark Gahi. Even he rose up
Mark
from the
Gahi
ranks.
as well. Well, Mark Gahi was obviously the least experienced out
Yeah,
of the five. He
obviously.
ended up going on loan to Swansea. But Fikayo Tomori was promising at Derby. He had played under Frank, so I wouldn't blame him for trusting him and keeping in the squad. So what happened this season is, obviously, we had to focus more on replacing Eden Hazard's number. So we had to take more risk game after game. We had to go more attacking in order to try and give our strikers and wingers ample amount of chances so that they can convert. Because if you actually break down attacking statistics of the Premier League, Chelsea ranked third in terms of created. That means we've created the most chances after City and Liverpool. And that is something we had to do because we didn't have luxury attackers, luxury established attackers. So we had to sort of provide them that many chances so that they at least end up scoring one or two. So, and while we were doing that, we lost a lot of defensive structure. And when you do not have established world class centre backs, left backs, right backs at the club, you're going to concede any single day. So I wouldn't really go too hard on Lampard on that because there's a trade-off we had to make between being more controlled in possession and creating more chances in scoring, or being more defensive but not scoring in games. And on top of that, Kepa has had a horrible season.
Yeah.
Yes, his
But
dip
don't get
has
me
been.
started on Kepa this year.
That's what I'm saying. Like he doesn't catch a ball. He's playing with absolutely no confidence. So that doesn't help. So like yeah, has been shaky, but I wouldn't go too hard on Lampard. I expect the club to get a couple of defensive signings to boost our squad for the coming season. Yeah.
I also personally feel Kepa situation can be sorted out after by getting a new coach or someone who can help him psychologically or something, who can be a good mentor to him. Like that
I
is
feel
one
Smith, to be
thing
honest,
that
I
might
think
help.
Kepa's time, at least temporarily at the club, is over. I mean, him being
Yeah,
dropped for the
couldn't agree more.
ultimate
Yeah,
game against Wolves sort of indicated to the fans and to the
Lampard
board
doesn't
that
trust him. Yeah,
yeah, and like I'm
Lampard
no
and the
blame
fans.
Lampard. Kepa
Yeah,
hasn't done anything to promise Lampard of a future starting spot. So I think Kepa will be sold or loaned out this summer, and we are looking at options there. Names like Onana, Nick Pope, Dean Henderson being linked with Chelsea at the moment. So I think goalkeeper goalkeeper is definitely coming at the club.
yeah, it's quite clear that Lampard, the fans, and the board also doesn't trust Kepa to be between the sticks for our club.
So I mean,
But
yeah.
They're
What
spot on with that.
what do you all think
yeah,
that what was the lowest point of the season and what was the highest point of your season this year?
Yeah.
for me personally, I cannot say a high point, but obviously, as Jaden mentioned earlier, the 7-1 win, that was a high point. And secondly, most importantly, was the 4-all draw against Ajax in the Champions League match. Like from being 4-1 down to coming back 4-all and then scoring a 5-4, which SP's goal was ruled offside. So
So yeah,
so that game showed the new Chelsea, which had the fighting spirit to give it back to the opponent and not fear from sitting back after going a goal down, or then showing a depressed mentality when you are trailing by two. Even the game against Liverpool on the game week 37, Chelsea lost that match 5-3. Yes, but when the match was uh, equal at around 70 minutes and the scoreline at 4-3, that moment I would have to say, I think you would agree, Vinam, that some Liverpool fans feared that Chelsea could make it 4-4.
Yeah.
Like the momentum of the match was totally in Chelsea's favor, and if not for that goal, that counter attack by Liverpool,
Chelsea would have definitely got the
Chelsea would
fourth
have
goal. Yeah.
easily gotten the fourth goal and drew it at Anfield, which would be a big achievement, especially scoring 4 goals at Anfield, which is not
Yeah.
any good Premier League team has done.
Definitely.
and what is the
Yeah.
lowest? What is the lowest point?
So for me,
Uh,
bro, I
yeah,
think I'll take that question, Smith. Yeah.
yeah, go on.
Yeah. So for me, the lowest point I think has to be the period during January, February, when we were in a very comfortable position in the league. I think we were sort of 12 points above Man United, and the mood surrounding Chelsea was very happy. and we let that slip. That slip was unacceptable, wherein we went 6 matches in the Premier League without a win, and that was unacceptable. Like, irrespective of how many excuses we want to make out of the season, you cannot expect Chelsea to go winless 6 games in a row. So that was a solid low point in our season, and we sort of made up that post restart, and that lockdown came at the right time for us. But that was a terrible moment for us. With Tammy Abraham absolutely dropping form, he looked clueless in attack, and we considered left, right, and center. So I think that was a low point. And I think our high point was our reaction to the shaky start of the season, where we lost 4-0 to United, and then we played the Super Cup wherein we lost on pen. And then we came back. We came back to go on a marching run of 6 wins in a row. And that sort of defined our season and gave us that sort of cushion in the Premier League, to be honest. And that sort of gave us top four this season.
And so I think we all can agree that Frank has indeed, with the resources at hand, has done a decent job in his first season. He
More than
has,
decent.
yeah, I mean, he studied the ship somewhat, and like Chelsea was, I think, yeah, no one expected them to probably be a top four side, but like, yeah, so in some terms he has overachieved. But I mean, I've seen a lot of Chelsea fans not making excuses for him, and like making just bringing up the transfer ban wherever possible, like whatever shortcomings, and like they praise him for what he's doing well, but then at the same time, when the defenders concede goals, there is no sort of scrutiny or accountability on Frank. So what do you think
No, like I said,
about that?
obviously we need to blame Lampard for the amount of goals that we have conceded this season. But we do not have to stretch that
If
beyond
you know,
proportion.
Derby County also considered the same amount of goals in a 40. How many matches do they play? 23, 46 games, right? 46 games in Championship. Frank Lampard, Derby County considered the same amount of goals that Chelsea considered this season. So that's
Yeah.
quite a big number, barring the number of game difference. So Lampard's defense is obviously something that has to be
So do you
Yeah,
think
I
that
mean,
will
I think, yeah.
do you think that will improve with Frank's individual coaching ability, or probably your defensive side of the coaching staff is not
I
up
think it
to
is
the mark?
definitely bound to improve, because if there's one thing that Frank has shown this season is that he's very humble to accept his mistakes and learn, and so make
surely.
comebacks. And obviously, when you talk about Chelsea's defense, okay, Frank's tactics is one thing, but like I said, after losing Hazard, we had to be a risk-taking side. We had to go more offensive to find goals. So that is one tactic that he had to approach this season, because he had no other option. And secondly, the personnel that we have in defense is not the best. You look at the goals we concede, and you can literally point out individual mistakes from Antonio Rudiger, from Andreas Christensen, or sometimes is it Alonso or Reece James. So, like, a lot of it is down
And
to
Kepa too. Jeet and
Kepa,
Kepa too.
obviously.
Predominantly.
A lot of
So do you think
individual errors.
that given your personnel, Chelsea has conceded lesser goals than what you expected, or they've conceded more than what?
They have considered a lot more because players have been extremely poor in either communicating or their personal positioning.
I mean,
And
obviously,
collectively as a defensive unit,
So
they've
you
been
think
quite
you've over
poor.
conceded goals? You all think you'll have over conceded?
yeah, and that is, I
110%.
think,
Jeet,
down
go
to
on.
Kepa.
Yeah,
I think that is down to Kepa not saving a lot of goals that should have been saved.
quite easy saves.
Bad, but we usually enjoyed 70% possession most of the games we played. So we didn't really concede that many shots on target. There's a stat which says Chelsea have conceded the least shots on target. Have conceded the third least shots on target in Europe's top 5 leagues. So that
Yeah.
means that we are actually dominating a lot of possession and not opening up the defense, not opening up in terms of conceding shots that much. But in spite of if we concede this much, I think that's down to the goalkeeper, in my opinion.
And so, like, just
Surely,
wrapping
couldn't agree more with you, Jeet.
Yeah.
Well said.
this Lampard side of the topic, what can you all just summarize his biggest strength and his biggest weakness?
Jeet, go on.
Biggest strength for me
Go
has to
first.
be bravery. I think he's got back that resilient fighting spirit back at Chelsea that used to be back in the days. Like that no nonsense, no fear mentality, wherein any team we play on earth, we go to play our football, we go for the win. Doesn't matter the circumstances. If you look at his first interview, in spite of all the challenges that Chelsea had and the way no one predicted us to be in top four, he said that his goal has to be getting top four. I mean, it's Chelsea, it's top four. Like, it has to happen. I think that's his best part. He's got that sort of mentality back at the club. And in terms of weak point, I actually do not have anything particular to bring forward, but I think defense is the best I can say. Improvement in defense is needed. Yeah.
And don't
Yeah,
you like?
can't
And
agree with.
yeah, sorry,
Sorry,
go
go
on,
on.
go on.
All right. So as Jeet was mentioning, like positive is undoubtedly the resilience that Frank Lampard has brought back in the Chelsea team. Like from the era of the Terrys, the Drogbas, and the Frank Lampard, so that team was fearless. That team, no matter who we played against, that team scared the opponent just by mere presence. Like opponents actually feared, okay, this team might actually score. This team might, kick, give us a kick in the behind. So we need to be sure. We need to be on our A game if we want to defeat this Chelsea. That is something that Lampard is inculcating in the youth, and mentally teaching them how you need to be strong. So that is something which is a big strength that Lampard has brought back to this Chelsea. And speaking of weakness, I wouldn't determine it as a weakness, but as I mentioned earlier, he's still a learning manager. Obviously his defense has to be scrutinized, and how the Chelsea team is planning to fend off set pieces and how to structurally organize the defense, that is something that obviously needs to be worked on. There is no doubting that. But
All right.
obviously, as I said earlier, he's a learning manager, so that is something which we expect to be better over a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So obviously now we've debated about Lampard's achievements. So now, guys, who do you think was Chelsea's best player of the season and worst player of the season?
Best
Good
player,
question.
and yeah, great question actually. So best player, there are quite a few candidates. Like everyone has their periods, ups and downs. Like Tammy Abraham and Mason Mount started off with a banger when they came into the Premier League. Like no one expected them to be this great, but then their form dipped during November, December. Then they again picked up, or started to perform a little consistently after the lockdown. But for me, the player of the season has to be Matteo Kovacic, undoubtedly, because of his presence and how he has helped the team in transitioning the gameplay
Has to
from
be who?
defense
Sorry.
to attack. Kovacic, Matteo Kovacic.
But Kovacic. Okay, okay. Huh.
Could you hear me well?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, it's Matteo.
And who has been your most disappointing one?
I don't think there has to be any more doubts on that keeper. Undoubtedly, like
Yeah, I mean that
he
was
has been
pretty
the one who has,
expected, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, I walked right into that. Sorry.
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, Kepa is undoubtedly a worst player of the season, but in terms of player of the season, I have a different one. For me, it has to be Mason Mount
Oh,
because
tough.
he's done a
He was my second
massive
choice.
job.
He was my second
He's
choice.
done a massive job for us. He's like Mr. Consistent. He rarely has bad games. He's just missed one Premier League game the whole season. And best part is, no one expected him to play this sort of crucial role for he did. Obviously, he's sort of Frank Lampard favorite, but he sort of justifies it on the field. So for me, I
Surely,
have Mason Mount, but it could have very easily been Tammy Abraham had he not had that major form dip. Like, in spite of probably having 2 dry months, he still managed 15 goals, which have been very crucial for us. And that's really not bad in his debut season in the Premier League. So I would go for Mason Mount as my player of the season.
yeah. Like as I said earlier, he was obviously my second choice, not just because of the goals or assists, but because of the intensity and him moving forward, helping the striker and pressing the opponent. Like
Yeah,
Lampard's system revolves a lot around pressing, and
yeah,
Mason Mount is the nucleus in the team, who leads the press.
agreed.
So that's
I mean, Mason
something
Mount's
which,
off the ball characteristics are quite underrated.
yeah, quite underrated actually, and
Yeah.
that is something which has been his biggest asset, and that is why I wouldn't say no to what Jeet has mentioned, and obviously Mason Mount is someone who can be Chelsea's player of the season.
Yeah.
All right.
Now,
Now that we have already decided that, I mean, Chelsea's season was pretty, I mean, defensively not that great. So, I mean, going ahead, Yola obviously bought in Timo Werner, ZH, and probably very strong in the attacking front. But on the defensive side, Yola pretty shaky, as obviously we've discussed. So,
True.
who do you all
True.
think are the key targets? I mean, do you all think you'll need like how Liverpool they had one bad season, then they signed Allison and Van Dijk, and boom, Champions League final.
Yeah.
So, do you
Yeah.
all think
I
that
think.
that's
Yeah.
what you'll need?
Jeet,
I
go
think we
first.
have a
You want to?
similar window to Liverpool. wherein a Van Dijk and Alisson coming in completely change the defense. We obviously gonna have a goalkeeper coming in. Now there have been a lot of names coming out in the media. There's Onana, there's Nick Pope, there's Ter Stegen, there's even Oblak. But I personally, I wouldn't want to spend heavy on any goalkeeper at the moment. I want a sort of reasonable but quality prospect in terms of Pope or Dean Henderson. I would take any of those for PL Pro 1 as well. So I think
Even
that's one defense.
Onana's costing less than 30 million or so.
Yeah,
Even he
even
falls
Onana
in
will
the
be reasonable
category.
option. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
go
So
on,
I
go on.
think a keeper will definitely come in, and I also think a centre back will be. I hope that either of Andreas Christensen or Rudiger is sold this summer because it's high time Chelsea move on now. And I hope established world class centre back comes in. Now there are not a lot of names available in the prep, so I think we'll have to look abroad if we are looking at those big money, huge centre back options. And there's a report recently which said Chelsea are interested in Jimenez from Atletico, who is a pretty solid centre back option. I wouldn't mind it. But in case we decide not to spend heavy on centre back option, another versatile option that could improve our defense would be Declan Rice. Not only can he play CDM, he can also provide centre back, and he's a natural leader and he's a born defender. So I think either of those will definitely improve our defense along with the goalkeeper. And we are also looking to sign a left back. I think Emerson Alonso, one of them will be moved on, and we'll definitely get a better left back because that's also been a problem area for Chelsea. So I think we are looking at 2 or 3 signings in defense at least, apart from Timo Werner, Hakim Ziyech, and Kai Havertz, which is looking really likely at the moment. So I think we are looking at a really productive and good window for Chelsea, which also leaves spaces open for academy starlets in terms of Reece James being probably the preferred right back option next year and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah, I think it's just a one in one out policy. Like if we want to sign a centre back, we obviously have to let one go. Same goes with the
yeah,
left back as well as the goalkeeper. So speaking of centre backs, like Declan Rice is a fan favorite who people want Chelsea to buy. Secondly, is the big name team Koulibaly and all those, but such deals are unlikely to happen. And speaking of left back, there are many names popping up like Chilwell, Telles, Tagliafico, and many more. So it again depends on what the club sees or what is Lampard's predominant wish or which he wants to see the club sign. So depending upon him, Precek and Marina Granovskaya, depending upon those three and who the club sees reasonable enough, would be the one wearing the Chelsea jersey next season.
yeah.
And finally, wrapping up, I just wanted to know your thoughts on this situation that the CDM position of Chelsea. I mean, Kante and Jorginho. Kante doesn't seem to be fit. He's not reliable anymore in terms of giving you consistent games. And Jorginho, on the other hand, is not reliable in terms of giving you a consistent performance. So, what are your this is the last question. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, so you
Yeah.
think Declan Rice should be bought in to cover the CDM position or to cover the centre back position? Or if
See,
not, then
Declan
who
Rice is
else?
someone who, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
Declan
go
Rice is a player who has great versatility. All right, so he's a player who can play a centre back as well as a CDM position, as you rightly mentioned. With Kante, not performing well, and with Jorginho's defensive vulnerabilities, I think Declan Rice would be a good choice for the club to bring in. Secondly, speaking of the main trade that Jorginho brings into the team, we have a young kid named Billy Gilmore, who is quite fan favorite and possesses the same trait that fans believe who could be the next Cesc Fabregas for the club. Like many people in newspapers have even touted him to be the next Spanish, like Scottish Iniesta and all, going by the reports. And if irrespective of his physical traits, mentality, aggressiveness, and the ability to control the midfield and dictate the gameplay is something that a lot of fans have been quite impressed with, especially from his performances against Everton and Liverpool when he consecutively won the Man of the Match awards.
Yeah, I
So
think I
his
agree.
yeah,
Yeah. And
but
I
so
think
I think
Jorginho this
Jorginho
season
is replaceable by him in the next
he's
1 to
not
3 years
really
if he
cut out
develops well.
for the Premier League. Like he's a very system player. Like I think he's way too used to Sari's system and he's sort of failed to adapt to Lampard's system. That's almost
Agreed.
left us to action. the back four. So I think Jorginho will be moved on this summer. He's likely to join Juventus. And I think, yeah, I mean, if you face the reality, Kante has missed half of the season with injury. It's
More than 20
literally
games in the Premier
that's
League.
been a huge loss to us, and that is also a sort of factor for us conceding so many goals. So I'd like competition in that place in case we lose out Kante to injury again in the coming season, which is why Declan Rice will be a solid option to get because not only can he play centre back when Kante is fit, he can also deputize into CDM and become a sort of long-term replacement for N'Golo Kante.
Gee, but don't you think that is also something that would be considered depending upon what formation does Frank Lampard plan to predominantly use in the next season? Like
That is very
both,
true.
yeah.
And
So
like
even that's a big factor to be considered.
definitely. I think in the long term, Frank's preferred formation is either going to be 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. We have seen him literally use 10 different
Yeah,
formations this season. I mean, and I
that
think
is something good though. That is something
he's
good.
going to switch between 4-2-3-1 and 4-3-3 because he loves
Agree.
playing with two number eights, two offensive number eights,
Yeah,
and a deep lying CDM. And
you
Declan
used
Rice
to
can
the
very
word
well
out of
play
my
that.
mouth.
Yeah, and Declan Rice can very well play that CDM position, and with Mason and Kai Havertz being the number eights, so that is one option. Or you could play a double pivot of Kovacic and maybe Mason Mount because he can play deep as well. So yeah, I think that's a question that we'll probably get the answer coming season, but I think he'll have to keep his options open.
Sure thing.
So Chelsea fans, I mean, obviously, you'll have a lot to look forward to next season. Timo Werner, obviously, will probably be banging a lot of goals. So Smith and Jeet, I mean, what are your final predictions? Do you actually feel Chelsea can actually push for the title, probably get over the 90-point hurdle, or they'll still hover at third spot, maybe second, challenge for
I think
Liverpool?
title will be way too much to expect
That
to.
is, yeah,
Because
correct.
it's after all it's a long road to go back from a squad that struggles to finish top four to being title contenders. Sometimes it can happen very quickly, like we did with Conte. We went from 10th to
Contest for season.
but I think if we are really able to find a proper defensive fix, maybe, and if everything like ticks properly, we don't have many injuries, maybe we got a shot. But I wouldn't want to expect too much. I'd be realistic. Probably a title contenders in the season after next would be ideal, and a lot of progress in terms of a very comfortable performance, a solid cup victory, either winning the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup, and a respectable run in Champions League is what I look forward to next year.
Same. I
Smith?
would see Chelsea as a dark horse in the title race next season. Chelsea can be the dark horse, who can pressurize Liverpool, who can pressurize the likes of Liverpool and Manchester City, and be someone who can be like, if you guys miss it or fuck it up, then we are there to make you realize how costly that mistake is.
Yeah,
So
true.
yeah, so I wouldn't expect Chelsea to win the title right away next season, but I would expect Chelsea to put up a good solid performance in the Premier League across the 38 games, which secures good Champions League football and also establishes a certain aura, like how and shows a certain development. Like this season, we scraped through and got in fourth. That was not just because of Chelsea's performance, but also of mistakes made by clubs like Manchester United and opportunities missed by Tottenham. So next year, I would want Chelsea to be a team who goes predominantly main on its own merit and establishes a certain authority and shows great development in terms of team progress,
Wrap,
teamwork, and a vision where the club is headed.
wrap it up,
All
wrap it
right.
up.
Yeah,
All right.
very well said, bro.
All right.
Thanks,
That was
thanks.
it for the Chelsea review, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay tuned for more extra content. Please like, share, subscribe. Please go follow Chelsea or Chelsea Mumbai
Mumbai,
on the IG
Instagram.
link provided below. And thanks for watching and bye.
All right, see you soon,
Bye bye, man.
guys.
Take care.